All right, so today we are going to go over the Cold War stuff that we talked about this week. But first, you guys are going to write down your bell ringer and have some sentences to get you started. Today we're going to be reviewing the Marshall Plan, the Truman Doctrine, and the Korean War, and then we're going to move into we talked about the GI Bill too. We're gonna move into Truman's policies for immigration, because I forgot to talk about it. We're gonna review McCarthyism and then talk about Eisenhower and his Highway Act we'll talk about the Brown versus Education next week. So you're gonna just answer these questions in your notebook. So what is the Marshall Plan and how did it help Europe? You have some sentences for that. And then, I'll scroll up. What was the results of the Korean War? The worksheet we were working on Monday, we're gonna finish kind of working on that. And then, if we have time, you guys are gonna do another worksheet that has similar topics in your groups. But we have to finish it. Can we get my mouse? Okay. So it'll take about like 10 minutes, 10 or so minutes to talk about this. We'll chat about it, and I'll do a quick review, and then we'll move on. If you're missing any work or anything like that, please get it in soon. Our next unit test is gonna be March 31st, by the way, so this is gonna be this unit and also Kennedy, so, yeah, Eisenhower.
Well, that's only units.
US history has, I believe, 15 or 16 units, so this is a shorter unit. These are gonna be shorter because we're getting to modern day presidents, so yeah, just take about 10 minutes or so, write this down.
So we're gonna have a whole unit ready for the president? We're gonna have a whole unit ready for the president?
Just the events that happened in the presidency. So this right now is Truman and Eisenhower. We're gonna be talking about Kennedy soon. Then we'll get past Kennedy to Johnson. Then after Johnson, we'll get, all those more people, Carter.
And then we're gonna get to the third round presidents?
We're gonna get to Obama's first election.
Do we answer the questions or answer the
What's his name though? The plum? Yeah.
There's two different.
1997.
What one do we answer?
Bill.
Oh, Bill, we'll look at Bill a little bit.
Bill Clinton?
He's on the White House.
Yeah, Bill Clinton.
The Marshall Plan was blank, the Marshall Plan helped
He's been at
Europe blank. The Korean War was a conflict between blank and blank
5 times.
with assisted.
Alright, so on the board, in the black, you have sentences. If you need help getting started, you're just gonna use that to kind of bounce off of that. If you do not remember, I would suggest looking back over your notes, because you guys are gonna have to know what the Marshall Plan is for the test. Kevin, you can change your attendance. But yeah, we'll take about another 8 minutes and we'll get started.
On the board.
I did see around.
You do not have to use those stems, but you do have to write something.
9981.
The bearing was.
That's gonna be on the notes, don't look
What
at that,
is the
that's not
Marshall Plan and
important.
how did it help Europe after World War II?
So you're gonna be looking at, if you're using this as a stem, you're looking at the black. I'll talk about this later, because I didn't specify which executive order it was, so. Also, did everybody get a worksheet, Monday
I think so.
for the President Truman's, presidency? Cause that's what we're gonna be working on when we're finished, chatting for a second. Check your, usuals. Okay, give me your notes. If you don't remember, because it was Monday and we did test, so.
I was so much work on Monday. What did I have to do that on Tuesday?
That's just how school goes, y'all.
We still got the Chipotle Locus, the BT, BT thing.
TB.
TB. The longest, which one?
TV.
Yeah, I know, but what is this one?
Are you scared of it, like?
Get TV, you get TV.
You're scared of it. I don't like it.
There's a way to treat it though, so I mean, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Guys, please write. If you need a refresher, check your notes. If you don't have your notes, there's a note sheet always on eClass that has notes. You need to look at it.
Already most today?
Yes,
Do we have it on notebook already, or was it?
it's already on eClass.
No, is it, do we have it on thing, or it's from the old one?
It should be on the same sheet,
Okay.
so we're just gonna keep going. If you didn't already fill it out, cause I think I filled out the whole sheet, and then, just went from there.
Okay, just, I just want.
Pretty sure I did. If I didn't,
Just write it down.
then I will get it up soon. Alright, you guys need a few more minutes?
A little bit long.
Huh?
Yeah, I
A
finished.
little bit longer.
I finished.
Give you guys a few more minutes.
Both of the questions are government?
Yeah. They combine them all. I mean, there's two parts for each one. Should be very short, so if you need a refresher on what it is.
What's the
look
second
at
one say?
You talking about the Korean War one?
Yeah.
The Korean War was a conflict between which country and which country with assistance by the US.
No.
The result was what? So which two countries were involved primarily in the Korean, well,
It wasn't in Japan and.
not necessarily two countries. What was going on in
Oh.
Korea at the time?
Oh, the.
North and South Korea were fighting.
And then remember, one side had assistance from the US. So after the US stepped in to assist the side they were supporting, what happened?
The side that the US started winning. The side that the US was hoping started winning.
Yes. We're gonna go more into detail about it because it was kind of a push-pull thing with the Korean War, but we'll talk about that when we're working on our worksheet. If you already finished, there is a second worksheet, so I will give you that. If you're finished, but we will finish this first one first, but I don't think everyone's finished it. Now you had already finished that first one, or are you still?
I'm finished.
Alright, so do you guys need more time?
Wasn't it the jungle? It was the
Okay, what you say?
Guerrilla tactics?
Oh, no.
That's
Guerrilla warfare.
Vietnam War.
Oh.
We're not there yet. We will get there after we get, after Kennedy's assassination, we'll get to Vietnam.
Let's go, dude.
Yeah, so we
I
have,
was needing
like,
it.
Oh, where's my folder?
Alright.
You know where the folders are?
What's the?
So folder? You.
It's Kennedy, and then Johnson is when the Vietnam War started. So his vice president takes over once he's assassinated.
Oh, that's the one we're
With the
working
Vietnam
on?
War. Yeah, that's what we're gonna be working on. Yeah. Okay, you guys ready? Alright, so, what was the Marshall Plan?
On the folder.
Oh, you should. Don't you do?
Finished.
Oh, yeah, I do.
You should.
It's not there.
Maybe you can check the stats. Check the stats. Where's the photos? Where's the still working? Check the stats.
Man, I don't got no internet on me.
I think they were saying they were having some issues with the Wi-Fi in the school, so if it doesn't work, just,
I
we'll
don't got
figure
no
it
type of
out.
signal down here.
Okay, sorry. So what was the Marshall Plan?
It was help to, the Western Europe after the World War II, so they wouldn't turn communist, like, we get help from the
Yeah, so when you're saying help, what kind of help are you saying?
Military and money and resources. They're getting
Yeah,
money.
resources, right? Because this is post-World War II, Europe is basically in shambles, they need to rebuild. So, the Marshall Plan is gonna help, help Europe economically rebuild, but also help them secure their government, because they need to, fight up against the communists, okay? The Soviet Union. The Korean War was a conflict between who?
North and South Korea.
Yes, North and South Korea. So, modern day North and South Korea is what kind of government? Communist and, yep, democratic, okay? So, which side was helping who?
South, North, or South, US. No, South was held by the
The USSR. And then the South Korea was being assisted by
South Korea was held by us.
us.
North Korea
And,
was being held by Germany.
Yeah, not Germany, but the USSR.
Oh,
So then the result of that was that 38 parallel line. Okay. So we're gonna just pop back into it really quick. I'm gonna open up the slide from Monday. Let's see. Okay. So guys, the Wi-Fi may be a little tricky, I don't know, so we'll see. Alright, so the Wi-Fi is acting a little
Yeah, we don't got Wi-Fi, man.
strange, so I'm just gonna pull this up on my,
Your phone?
my, flash drive.
You even talk to it. Who that one? This
It's this
is
one.
Wi-Fi next to each other. Back there?
Go on. This one.
There,
You got a picture?
there it is. Alright, Kevin, as you go back to your seat, thank you so much. Alright, I'm gonna pull this up. Alright, ignore the number that's not correct. Okay, I don't know what that's going on. Okay, anyway, let's have to move on. Alright, okay. Alright, I can't put this any bigger, I don't know what's on my computer, so. Alright, so you guys remember this map here?
Yeah.
So, sorry, I can't make it bigger, the Wi-Fi's not working, so I have to do what I have to do. Alright, so based off of this map, which, countries are getting the most aid?
I can't tell what its name, but the one in the
England?
phone box.
Let's not say names, let's think about direction.
South.
West.
West,
Oh, that's one.
West.
Western.
okay? So remember, your Western Europe is gonna be influenced by Western countries like the United States. The United States puts aside $13 billion to assist Europe after World War II. Now, you can notice that no states in the East are getting this assistance because they're controlled by who again?
Communist is Russia.
So-
USSR.
And necessarily Russia, because there's multiple states in the USSR, but yes. So, they don't get any assistance over here because the USSR does not want American influence in their government. So, all the countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, they're not gonna get those, resources or money because they do not trust the US. So, you're gonna see that Western countries like France and all of our allies that happened during the war are going to take the assistance, but also other countries that, were not our allies are gonna get that assistance with the pledge that they're going to be, a democratic country and not join the USSR, okay? So that's the Marshall Plan. That was giving them supplies, money, and also helping them have security against the USSR coming in and taking over their countries, okay? In terms of your Korean War, you guys remember what I was talking about the 38 parallel, right? And how we have North and South Korea. So, because China is also part of the USSR or they're communists, you're going to see that communism is going to have a larger influence on North Korea than it will with South Korea. South Korea wants to have a democracy, so they're going to have a conflict. What's going to end up happening is that the USSR is going to assist North Korea, and then America is going to assist South Korea, America and NATO, and then China and the USSR is going to help North Korea, okay? What's going to happen, they're going to have a conflict, their borders are going to be pushed. The 38 parallel is the border between North and South Korea, and they're going to create a demilitarized zone near that area. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. So your 38th parallel is basically the border between North and South Korea. It still exists. Right near that border is the demilitarized zone where you can't just cross. You have to have all this paperwork and things like that. If you try to escape from North Korea to South Korea, they'll shoot at you because you can't do that, okay? All right, so we talked about the GI Bill already. You guys remember what the GI Bill was about? So remember, you have all these World War II veterans coming home.
I was helping them out.
What are they helping them with?
Loans for houses and money and stuff.
And businesses, and what else? Where are we at?
After World War II.
Where are we right now, us?
In the United States.
Georgia.
What building are we in?
So school.
And a school. So your GI Bill's gonna give them money to go back to school, okay? They wanted to make sure that they can have ease to maneuver themselves back into civilian society after World War II, okay? There was a concern that they were not gonna be able to do so because the women were in the jobs, but they created, more industries for people to work. I forgot to say this about Truman. Truman is going to desegregate the military. You should write this on your notes. He's going to, basically, he's gonna desegregate. It's already technically desegregated because of FDR, but what he's gonna do, he's gonna ban racism in the military. So he's gonna use Executive Order 9981 to ban segregation in the military. Okay, so make sure you guys write that down. You're gonna see it again.
Well,
Executive Order 889
for what country?
on your notes, wherever Truman is, write it down. You will need to know that. So that's banning racism in the military. Military and government jobs.
Which one is Truman? I don't know what was the name.
Harry Truman, it should say Harry Truman on your notes. Yeah. Should be on your note sheet in your folder, so it should look like this.
This is where is it? Is it this one?
The note sheet I gave you guys on
Is
Monday.
it Truman Doctrine?
No,
You can write it there. Let me see your note sheet real quick. I don't know if I have any more copies. So it should say Cold War up top, and it should look like this. So just squeeze it near Harry Truman or Truman Doctrine.
What was his name? Okay. Oh,
So just
Truman
squeeze it
Doctrine,
near Truman Doctrine.
Okay,
Okay?
that's what we're confused about. Which
Yeah.
one, the top one? The top?
Yeah, the Executive Order 8899 is going to ban racism in the military and government jobs.
Okay.
Okay?
It's down here on the back.
I mean, I have to do another one. Alright, so, vocabulary you guys need to be familiar with. You have to know what the Marshall Plan is and what containment is. What are we trying to contain from spreading throughout the world after World War II?
Racism.
Yes, but also what?
Communism.
Communism, okay? We're trying to contain communism, so you need to know what containment Marshall Plan, what the GI Bill does, and what the Truman Doctrine is. So remember, your Truman Doctrine is going to assist our allies by providing economic and military assistance, right, after World War II. Alright, that was all we did Monday. I don't know if my slide is gonna work. Alright, so remember, we talked about this guy here. You guys remember what, the Red Scare is?
Yeah, when people just want to think that they were, finding spots.
Yes. So remember, this is a senator. He is up for re-election. What he wants to do, he needs to get re-elected. So he's gonna basically campaign on the idea of, hey, we need to stop communism in America. Remember, he's gonna say that. Actually, what did he say? What did McCarthy say about communism in the U.S.?
That was a general.
That was spreading.
It was spreading, but was his claims always
Oh, no, it was
correct?
like, it was,
I thought you were
Pointing out
expecting
false.
authority.
he was giving
That was
false
actually our-
information.
Yes. So remember, he gave false information, he had false evidence, because most of the people he accused of being communists were not communists, okay? And so, because he did this, after a while, he's gonna probably turn his attention to the US Army, and they're gonna basically discredit him, like, hey, he's not telling the truth, and his whole campaign, everything kind of falls off. That make sense?
Yeah.
Alright, so now, this is new information, we're gonna be talking about Dwight Eisenhower, okay? We're gonna be talking about Dwight Eisenhower. He is President 34, so he's gonna serve from 1953 to 1961 when the Berlin Wall is gonna be built. Currently does not exist. Once he's leaving office, they're gonna build that wall. Okay? So, what do you guys notice about these two pictures? What is this? What's going on?
The opening of highways.
Right. So, what you guys need to know about Eisenhower, he served in the army. So he had first-hand experience in seeing what was going on in Europe. What's gonna happen is, they're gonna create this highway to connect the entire United States, because Eisenhower saw when we were over, actually, quick question. What challenges did we face when we were in Europe and also in the Pacific?
Bad routes.
You said bad routes. Explain that, what do you mean?
We didn't know where to go. We didn't have,
He said we don't know where to
I
go.
don't know, bro.
Okay, so when we were over in Europe, was it easy for us to transfer our supplies?
No, we didn't have any, fucking routes. More routes. I don't know.
Not necessarily routes, but we had to deal with enemy fire, right? And also we had to cross random oceans to avoid the Atlantic to get to Europe, so it took us a while to get our supplies. Eisenhower was a part of the war. He saw that, hey, Europe did not have the infrastructure to move their supplies easily. So his idea to create a connected interstate was because of what he saw over in Europe. So if we drive from Georgia to Michigan, can we take, let's say we're gonna take 75. You can take 75, and I don't know if this is accurate, probably 85, whichever one it is. You can take 85 from Georgia all the way up to Michigan. So you're gonna have your highway systems connecting from state to state. The reason why Eisenhower did this, because if we were ever to be attacked by any other nation, he wanted to be able to deploy troops quickly, and he also wanted to be able to move supplies throughout the United States quickly, and also have an advantage over anybody that wanted to come in and possibly invade the United States. So this is gonna be approved by Congress, and Eisenhower is going to basically have 41,000 miles of interstate created. Another thing this is gonna create as well is you're gonna start to see those cookie cutter homes. So this Levittown word is talking about those homes. So you guys have ever been in a neighborhood that all the houses look the same, right?
Yeah.
That is where the first suburbs are gonna start. So your 11 towns are gonna be suburbs, okay? Suburban homes, okay? So, your 11 towns, you're gonna see this again, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be on the test. Hint, hint. These are, suburbs, or suburban neighborhoods. And also, because now we have highways, you're gonna see America's gonna be booming economically. So we're gonna have a lot more cars. And because we have highways, people are gonna start taking road trips. We're gonna be able to trade a lot more easily because we now have access to the United States from state to state, not just with those railroads that they had built after the Civil War. So now we have roads. Now, everybody probably has driven on a road or has driven themselves on a road or a highway. This was originally planned for the military, but of course, now we know everybody drives on the highway. If you guys are ever near the airport, you will see sometimes they are transporting military grade things, okay? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay? Alright, Sputnik is the last thing we're gonna do. Alright, before I even get into Sputnik, does anybody know what Sputnik is?
No.
No idea. Alright, so Sputnik is a Soviet Union satellite that they're gonna launch into space, okay? And because America and the Soviet Union are in competition with each other, how do you think the Americans feel once the Soviets get a satellite into space first? They're gonna be upset, they're gonna be mad. So, the Soviets get Sputnik into space. You guys are looking at this cartoon. They have this paranoia that they're spying on us or they're gonna do something to us via the satellite or sharing information from America to the Soviet Union. So what you're gonna see is that this is gonna create this idea of the space race. So NASA's gonna be created, I think it's 1957. What they're gonna do, Americans now feel behind the Soviets. So they're going to start to increase spending on education for math and science. This is why you guys take chemistry, physics, pre-calculus, whatever, because they want to get the youth and everybody interested in these industries so that they can compete with the Soviet Union, okay? So your Sputnik is gonna start the space race. Eventually you're gonna get to the point where they're now gonna be launching men on the moon and all that good stuff. This is gonna start here. The situation with Sputnik will probably, is gonna expand over into Kennedy's presidency as well, but we'll talk about that when we get to Kennedy. So, question, is the internet working? Alright, so, if you did your worksheet on the internet, we're gonna start finishing up the worksheet that's labeled the presidency of Truman. So we've already done desegregation of military and the Truman Doctrine. We're going to finish Marshall Plan, Korean War, and the GI Bill. If we finish that, then we're going to move on to the next sheet that has similar things. So you'll need to open up your Chromebooks and get that started. We're gonna get started. All right, so if you've already finished, who's finished? Give me this one. Bless you. This one has readings on Google. So if you finish the first one, there's readings on Google you will need to use to answer those questions. If you want additional information, you will have to, bless you, we will have to use the YouTube videos. You finished that first one?
Yeah.
Did you turn back into Google? The first one says, true presidency?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure you turn it back into Google or share it. Alright, so, Kevin, do you have one?
Wait, what you mean? Is it talking about the paper?
Yeah.
The
Do you have a paper or do you have it on the computer?
I have a paper.
Okay.
I'm good or no?
Let me see. Do you have a paper? Oh, yeah.
Wait, this paper, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this one has readings on Google. There's videos too if you wanna watch them, but you do not have to, it's just use the Google to, answer that. I would suggest you annotate those readings first before you start answering questions, just so you can see where these things are. Alright. So everybody else, if you have your worksheet on Google or whatever paper, we're gonna start working on finishing this up. Here you go. Okay. So we're gonna be starting on the section for the Marshall Plan, and because we just talked about it, we should have a pretty easy time answering these. Okay?
I didn't think so.
Alright.
Oh, cause it was so big.
So for our first section, we're working on the Marshall Plan. First question we'll be looking for is, what did Marshall Plan do and what did it send? Number 2 is, what other benefits did it have? Where was communism contained, and then what countries were not helped? Alright, so I'm about to start this video, we will work on it.
Oh, this here. Technically, it's like this. So it starts from.
So I think I have the key for the front one class somewhere on the next screen. And the key for the front is on class. Yes, that's what we're about to work on this section. No, not the mission two, the presidency. Alright, so everybody has their worksheet? Yes? Alright, so we're gonna finish up this worksheet for the Marshall Plan, yes? Yes, we're gonna be on the section for the Marshall Plan, so if you don't have the beginning portion of that, we'll talk about it. So, what we need to do, I'm gonna open this up on YouTube, you guys are gonna listen and we're gonna answer the questions. Alright, so, what you need to look for, what did the Marshall Plan do? What did the Marshall Plan send? And then, we'll just start with the first two. And what 2 other benefits the Marshall Plan gave to the countries that needed assistance after World War II? Right? Everybody good on that? Everybody has their worksheet open?
Yeah.
Alright.
Why is Amazon paying me $63,000 a month? Well, I didn't make this kind of money selling yoga mats and toasters. Hooray! World War II is over! But Europe is in ruins. What can a country like the United States do to help? How about setting aside over $13 billion to help rebuild the smoldering continent? That's what the Europe need to recover.
Alright, that was the answer for the first one. So, your first question, what did the Marshall Plan do? And what did it send?
Wait, we're $13 billion?
For the first question for the Marshall. Yes, it says $13 million, right?
Billion.
Billion, not millions. With a B. Millions are like.
So, when you guys are writing this, I'm writing this down so you guys can see how you need to flush out your answers, because y'all give me answers that are like short. So I need to write things in full sentences, please. So, when you're answering this, the Marshall Plan is a financial plan that basically America set aside $13 billion to help Europe after World War II, because like we seen in our slideshow, Europe is in shambles. They need to rebuild completely because there's no structures or government going on. So not only do they send money, they do send supplies and food because their countries are destroyed. Okay? So please answer your questions in full sentences, please. Okay? Yes.
What day is it? What day is
This?
for this?
Don't worry about this one, we'll finish, this one is simple to do, finish this one first. Alright. Because I can have it. You said no. Oh, we're going to do it.
We're doing it right now.
So we're skipping, well, we already did this, so go down to March 20. Yeah, we're working on that section, we're gonna finish this one, and then if we have time, we have another sheet, you guys are gonna put it together. Yeah, but if you need the top, just start a Marshall Plan and then get the top of it. Okay. You guys good? I need a few more minutes. And then, also guys, it's not in the worksheet, but what was the other thing that they had to agree to when they took the aid from the Marshall Plan?
They had to stop what, fighting as much?
Not necessarily fighting, so remember, this is post-World War II.
Oh, join
Forward.
the cause, or join, I forgot what it's called,
So what did they, what two countries were world powers after World War II? USSR. But yes, so you have two political views. We're talking about Europe, so USSR is closer to countries in Europe. What were they trying to stop the spread of?
Communism.
Communism. So the countries that took the aid for the Marshall Plan had to make sure, well, they had to basically pledge like, hey, we want to have a democracy, we want to have our own government. Because the U.S. had this fear of communism spreading, which is going to extend over into Kennedy's presidency, by the way. So we'll talk about that later. We have one more president. No, we'll talk about Kennedy next week. But yeah, so we're gonna see how America is gonna have this fear of communism going into Kennedy's presidency, and it'll taper off to an extent. Okay, everybody good on this question? Anybody need more time? Me? Look at you, bro. Are you being serious or you're just playing?
I mean,
Got it, okay. All right, so next question, we're looking for two other benefits besides the money that the Marshall Plan is going to allow our allies to have. I think the internet just went out again.
It is.
Yeah, it's like, no. Okay, let's see where we get this to work. Is it not? It's gonna be so bad.
Plan, aka the Marshall Plan, sought to do: restore the European economy by giving foreign aid to countries that needed it. It was a brilliant move to win the peace by George C. Marshall, the plan's creator. Marshall had been a career military man, and during the war had served as the Army's chief of staff. He oversaw the U.S. military strategy and was one of the key figures behind the Allied victory. Marshall retired from the Army at the end of the war, where President Truman valued his brains too much. After serving as an ambassador to China, Marshall was appointed Secretary of State in early 1947. Soon after, he developed his European Recovery Plan and announced it in June of that year. From April 1948 to December 1951, the United States shipped food, fuel, machinery, and money to European countries. The goal was to help them get back on their feet after the devastation of the war. In one sense, this was good deed foreign policy. The United States was being a friend, using its considerable resources to help war-torn Europe. Plus, the last time the world left a conquered nation in ruins, Nazi Germany rose to power. But there were other reasons to implement the Marshall Plan as well. By investing in the economies of European countries, the U.S. helped create new markets for its exports. Perhaps we can interest you in a Buick. There was a strategic objective too. The U.S. wanted to isolate the Soviet Union, to keep it from expanding its sphere of influence beyond Eastern Europe.
All right, So what were two other, benefits of the Marshall Plan?
They wouldn't have the same accent as Hitler.
Say it one more time, Jonathan, I'm sorry.
They won't have the same accent like Hitler.
True, it will, stop another Hitler from coming out, but what did he say specifically about, markets?
No,
They
go
will
on.
increase.
So if we have free markets, how is that gonna assist America, y'all? So think about in terms of.
Increase the GDP.
Think about in terms of, we're a capitalistic, government, right?
Mhm.
We wanna make money. If we have free markets, what are people able to do?
Buy more resources that aren't available here.
Yes, so that's gonna open up trade to Western Europe, but, and then what was the other, benefit of the Marshall Plan? You kinda said it earlier.
More.
So you're trying to prevent another Hitler, but what are they trying to do for communism overall?
Not let communism spread.
What is that called again?
I forgot. I'll be
So,
honest, I forgot.
you guys remember I was saying, what do you, when you put your food in something, what does it do for the food?
Preserve.
Yes, but, okay, so you're storing your
Store.
food in what?
A barrel, a physical
Container?
A container. Remember, containment is stopping the spread of communism. Okay?
Oh.
So
okay.
containment is what they were trying to do. So America wants to allow free markets for trade, but they also want to contain, the USSR from spreading, okay? So those are two other benefits. We're gonna help our allies, and then in turn, once their economies are good, we will be able to trade with them. If you think about modern day United States, you see how we are assisting, the Ukraine and also Israel. We're helping them now while they're at war. Once they get into a better position, they'll be able to, assist us if we need it, or we can trade with them, yes.
They can go to the restroom.
All right, write yourself a pass and then we'll sign it. Okay, does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, so, your Marshall Plan, just so you guys remember, it's not just gonna help our allies, so there's other countries that are near Europe that they don't want the Soviets to get a hold of. Do you guys remember when I was saying, what I was saying about Turkey and Greece? What resources is, near Turkey and Iran?
Oil?
Water.
Yes. So remember, the, Americans does not want, the Soviet Union to get access to oil, because if they do, if they start a war, they have materials to
Keep going.
keep going. So they are also gonna help Turkey and Greece. But those countries near them, Poland and Czechoslovakia, will not get the same assistance. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay? So we kind of already answered number 3. So where are the communists contained? Where does the Soviet Union have the most influence? Which part of Europe?
China.
You said China? No.
No, it's fine.
Which part of Europe does the Soviet Union
North.
have the most influence over?
North.
No. No. So y'all remember when I showed you the map of the Marshall Plan?
No.
I just showed you.
It was wasn't it the south,
see it.
the south
I
of
wanna try to
Poland?
remember.
Or was that east? I heard
East. Remember, it's Eastern Europe. Okay? So Eastern
I like
Europe
that place.
is controlled
Yes,
by
sir.
the Soviet Union. Okay?
Yeah,
Western
Tom.
Europe is influenced by Western powers.
Oh,
Okay?
Western.
So your number 3 is going to be Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I'm gonna scroll up so you can see that. Okay? When we're talking about North and South, y'all, that was a Korean War.
No.
Don't get them confused. So. Alright. Let me know when you guys are good, we'll move. Almost good. our next question, you guys can't see it, I don't want to scroll up yet. What countries were not helped by the Marshall Plan? So we're gonna look at that.
How better to make capitalism appealing than to spread around money in a war-torn country? By the way, here are all the countries that received Marshall Plan aid in alphabetical order. Ready? Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and West Germany.
All Western
Now,
Europe.
if you listen closely, you might have noticed a couple of major European countries that weren't on that list. The USSR didn't trust the US intentions with the Marshall Plan and forbade Poland and Czechoslovakia from receiving.
Alright, so your two countries that did not get that. Do you guys remember what they called those particular countries that did not get aid from the Marshall Plan? What kind of device is Sputnik?
What?
Sputnik, we just talked about it. Oh my God, Jonathan, please focus. So, you guys, how do we use our phones? What's in outer space that helps us use our phones? Satellites. So what did I say about the countries that are closer to the USSR? What are they called? Satellite what?
States?
Yes. Your satellite states are not gonna get assistance because like he said, the Soviet Union does not want American influence that close to their borders, right? There's more states that, countries that don't get assistance, but Czechoslovakia and Poland are the most, noticeable ones. So. Get my mouse to. So, they were not assisted, okay? So you guys are trying to see how I'm using the information that I heard to give myself a more fleshed out answer. Okay, instead of like 1 or 2 words. You want to try to flesh out your answer as much as possible, because if you had a writing portion on something, you can answer your question more fully if you use the information that's provided. Especially when we have reading passages. You can literally pull your information out of your reading passage to answer the question. Okay? And also by restating the question, you can also add that to your response. Okay. Everybody good so far? Any questions?
No.
Alright, are we going on to the Korean War today as well?
We're gonna get to the Korean War. We may have to finish up a bit. If we don't get the GI Bill done today, we'll finish it up because we still have to touch on the federal highway stuff, McCarthyism, and the Board of Education, which I didn't talk about today. We'll talk about it and then we'll just kind of wrap it up on Monday and then we'll move on to Kennedy. Because these AKS for modern day presidents are a lot shorter, so we're not gonna be in them as long, but we will still have to touch on them because you guys have to know pretty much everything for your milestone, because we don't know what's on the test. Yeah. So I would try to get done with our modern day presidents either like right after we come back from spring break, because I gotta start a whole massive review for the whole semester, so y'all can be ready for milestones. Everybody good? Anybody need more time? No? Okay. So now we're gonna talk about the Korean War. We're gonna get more detail about it because it's gonna tell us in more detail about the leaders and how basically the conflict got started and how both the USSR and the American government got involved in that war. But remember, this is still post-World War II, so America wants to try to stop the spread of communism as much as possible. Now, before we even get into that, during World War II, who were our allies again? Who were the allied powers during World War II?
Oh,
England, France,
Yeah.
USA, Canada.
You're missing the most obvious one, we're talking about them today.
Europe.
Europe?
Europe, yeah, some Europe, but
Wait,
USSR.
Oh yeah,
Remember-
Russia. Yeah. I can-
Remember, they got control of Berlin, and once they got control of Berlin, the fighting in Europe stopped. That's when America turned their attention to the fighting in the Pacific. So we were allies, but remember, like I was saying on Monday, they were there to maintain control and keep the peace, but they decided not to give up the power after that. So that's when America and the USSR had a lot of tension. So, we're gonna see how, also, I forgot, remember Japan invades, China. China is now communist. So, Korea and China are very close together. China is going to, have influence over North Korea, like we just talked about. So they're gonna become communist, and South Korea wants to maintain their independence. So we're gonna talk about, well, basically, we've already talked about it, really. So what divides Korea and who occupies each side? We basically talked about this today. We talked about modern day, excuse me. My brain is not braining. We're talking about modern day politics. Who is the leader of North Korea?
Kim Jong-un.
Yes. What kind of government do they have?
Oh, the dictatorship. Yeah.
Yes, communism, right? And then South Korea, what kind of government do they have?
Dictatorship.
No, not South Korea.
Wait,
North
wait,
Korea does.
you said South Korea?
Yes.
Oh,
They have.
I thought you said China for a minute.
No. China is still communist, yes. So we already kind of know that one. So we're gonna just go ahead and answer that one. So, remember, your 38th parallel is the border for both North Korea and South Korea, okay? So know that in this particular time period, the Soviets are gonna have control of North Korea because North Korea wants to become a communist country, and the South is gonna be not necessarily controlled, but influenced by the United States, okay? We're gonna see how that's gonna kind of, build the tension during the Korean War, okay? The Korean War is not considered a Cold War because there's actually active fighting, but it's still encompassed in the Cold War era because this is post-World War II. Okay. That makes sense so far?
Yeah.
Everybody good or near 2
Oh,
minutes?
I know.
Everybody good?
I'm almost done. I'm done.
Alright, so what we're gonna be looking for, we're gonna be looking at which type of government is for each side, which we kinda already answered. But also, what we're gonna look at is the different leaders, and then which countries are assisting North and South Korea during the Korean War. Okay. We probably aren't gonna get to that second sheet, it's fine.
comes to an end. Japan surrenders to the Allies, giving up key areas of its vast empire, including a mountainous peninsula near the Chinese border, Korea. Korea is divided down the middle along the 38th parallel. The Soviets occupy north of the line. The Americans move into the south. By 1948, there are 2 new Korean states, each reflecting the politics of its occupier. South Koreans vote to establish a republic, electing a president, Syngman Rhee. In the north, Kim Il-sung is made premier of a pro-Soviet communist dictatorship.
Alright, so that answers our question. We already know which 2, powers are influencing these areas already, so we already know that North Korea is gonna be communist and South Korea is gonna be more democratic, but the leaders are, Kim Il-sung and also, Syngman Rhee is also the president or prime minister of, South Korea. So they're going to be, North Korea is going to be influenced and supported by the USSR and also China, which is communist, and South Korea is gonna have support from NATO, which is created after World War II, and Western countries, such as the United States. So you're gonna have pretty much big countries involved in this conflict. Yes. Alright. Oops. Sorry, I lost my mouse somewhere in my house. Better? Okay. And you guys already see number 3, so we're just gonna get on to it. The reason why Truman is going to deploy our troops is because North Korea is going to invade South Korea, which is basically, in his eyes, an act of war, okay? You can already see it. I believe Kim Il-sung is,
That.
I wanna say he's probably related to, Kim Jong-un, I believe.
Yeah, that was his dad.
Or his great-grandfather, one of them, I believe they're related in some way.
No, I think it was his dad.
How did they do it?
His dad,
Wait, was that pretty sure?
or
I
his
think it's like
grandfather, one of
it's
them,
an old generation.
yeah, they're related, I believe they're related, I don't know which person they are, but they're related.
I know they're related. Yeah, they're related.
Yeah.
All the papers. For real?
Truman creates NATO. NATO is kind of like the Western countries, like, not police force, but they're kind of trying to ensure that peace is still happening after World War II, because they don't want a situation like Germany to happen again. So NATO is created to basically create this, peaceful way to negotiate in, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, NATO is there to basically maintain the peace, after World War II. NATO is its own separate entity. We will see later, they're gonna have the United Nations created as well, but this is kind of the start of having those political talks in a peaceful, neutral area. But yes, NATO is one of them that we will see again. But we will also see the development of the UN during, I can't remember which president at the moment, but one of the presidents is going to be involved in that, okay? Everybody good or need a few more minutes?
I don't know.
If we think about modern day as well, because I'm thinking about it, let's say for instance, well, no, we can talk about it. You know how the war with Russia and Ukraine started? You guys know that, how it started?
So Ukraine wanted to be by itself?
Well, because Russia wanted Ukraine as, land, wanted the land, right?
Yeah. So Russia invades Ukraine, and now because Ukraine is a part of our alliances, we are gonna go in and defend them multiple countries, because we're a part of a NATO and they made a pact about protecting their allies. So this is why we're going to, make sure they have their war funded and supplied. So that's why we have some vested interest in what's going on in the Ukrainian and Russian war at the moment. Because of some of the things that start during World War II. Okay? And if we're talking about what's going on in Israel as well, America has a long-standing relationship with Israel. They're our allies, so if anything happens there, we're going to step in and try to assist them as much as possible. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far?
No, really.
No? Good, Jim?
Yeah, or else I'm-
Not bad.
Alright, so, there's a particular general that Truman is going to fire. This is going to also talk about the conditions of the fighting in Korea and how we're gonna basically get to the end of it. So we're gonna watch why Truman fires him and also the conditions of this war and how the war ends up coming to a close.
Korea becomes the center of the Cold War struggle. Border conflicts break out almost immediately. 38,000 Koreans, most of them civilians, are killed before war even begins. In the pre-dawn hours of June 25th, 1950, North Korea launches a surprise invasion across the 38th parallel. They are backed by logistics and arms from the Soviet Union and China. In 3 days, the North Koreans have captured Seoul, the southern capital. In Washington, President Truman orders U.S. troops into battle.
On Sunday, June 25th, Communist forces attacked the Republic of Korea. This attack has made it clear beyond all doubt that the international communist movement is willing to use armed invasion to conquer independent nations. The free nations face a worldwide threat. It must be met with a worldwide defense.
The United Nations, with the Soviet Union abstaining, votes to send an international fighting force to aid the South Koreans. The help is desperately needed. South Korea's army is disorganized and poorly equipped. Truman taps General Douglas MacArthur, an architect of World War II's victory in the Pacific, to head the multinational force. MacArthur's troops slow the communist advance, but can't stop it. U.S. and UN forces are squeezed into the southeast edge of the country. Their backs against the wall to the south, MacArthur orders a surprise amphibious attack at Incheon, on the western shore of the peninsula. It is a pivotal victory against the North Koreans. MacArthur believes that he is well positioned to drive the communists out of Korea entirely, ending the war. President Truman reluctantly agrees, afraid of escalating the war by drawing China onto the battlefield. The Southern Offensive gains momentum as U.S. and UN forces break through the stranglehold in Busan. They encounter little resistance from the exhausted communist troops. By November, they they have pushed the enemy to the banks of the freezing Yalu River, which separates Korea and China. Here, American troops celebrate Thanksgiving in 1950. A bit of home on the North Korean border. MacArthur's goal of total victory seems within reach, but the war was far from over. On November 25th, China sends in troops, handily pushing the Allies back into South Korea. The Chinese cut off MacArthur's forces at the Chosin Reservoir. The men endure weeks of battle in sub-zero temperatures. More are lost to cold than to enemy fire. Without the president's consent or approval, MacArthur calls for a full-scale invasion of China. His defiance has pushed Truman to his limits. On April 11th, the president fires MacArthur for insubordination.
Alright, so, what does General MacArthur do that makes President Truman fire him?
He, invades China.
Not invades China, but,
Or he tries to attack.
The next war.
yes, so he starts another like campaign to get control of Korea without the president's consent. You can't do that. The president is the commander-in-chief. You have to get permission from him to do stuff like that. It could have went really, really badly if it didn't end up in the Allies' favor. But because he does that, that's seen as insubordination, which is bad in the military. So he is going to fire him because you can't do things in a war. You can't do things in a war without approval from the appropriate person. And if you're ignoring the leader of the free world and doing whatever you want to do, it's bad. So he gets fired. Okay.
Then just do it. You're not gonna do it.
We're almost done with this section. We're probably gonna have to finish the GI Bill on Monday, and that's fine.
Not really.
Your GI Bill really you could really answer number 1 and 2 of your GI Bill now because we talked about it, but we will finish it today.
Not really.
Good? Cam, good? You good, Cam? Alright, so we honestly didn't answer the first part of number 5. So, based off of what we have heard and seen in this video, what was the fighting like in Korea? Horrible, right? So, would you say that one side had an advantage over the other?
No.
Right, it was kind of like a push-pull, right? One side would get an advantage, the other side would get an advantage, and then we kind of go from there. Remember he was saying that, the Americans didn't want China to get involved, but once China got involved, they kind of lost their advantage to the war. What's gonna end up happening is that they're gonna get to a point where they're losing so many men, they have to figure out how they're gonna end it. So we're gonna see that little bit, and then we will kind of wrap it up. This class is over at 12:23?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do this last one, and then we will kind of wrap up what we have learned today.
Coordination and calls him home. By summer 1951, Korean conflict is bogged down into a bloody quagmire. No side can win without enormous further loss of life. Peace negotiations begin optimistically, but drag on for 2 years. So does the fighting. By the end of the war, the U.S. has suffered more than 157,000 combat casualties. Korea and China lose approximately 1 million soldiers each. Korean civilians fare worst of all, with nearly 2 million wounded or dead. Then, in July 1953, a breakthrough. Chinese, North Korean, and American representatives sign an armistice agreement. Only South Korea refuses.
Alright, so that answers that question. Yay! So for five, what you're gonna do, you're explaining basically how the fighting is in the war. Understand that each side loses a lot of, soldiers. So, each side doesn't really come out on top really because they lose a lot of soldiers. South Korea loses a lot of civilians, but what's important to know is that only North Korea, China, and America signed this agreement basically to end fighting. South Korea does not sign it. They do not agree with how the agreement is written. So they don't sign it, but because their ally and basically their sponsor for this war signs it, the fighting ends. What's gonna end up happening is that by that 38 parallel line, they're gonna create that demilitarized zone. So that DMZ is the demilitarized zone that I told you guys about on Monday. That is near the border of North and South Korea. Remember, with your demilitarized zone, no fighting can happen in that area. So, like the story I was telling you guys about that soldier escaping from North Korea. I don't know if that was 5 or 6 years ago. He was running to try to get out of North Korea and they were shooting at him. As soon as he crossed that demilitarized zone, they had to stop shooting at him because if they kept going, they would have started the war, okay? So DMZ, demilitarized zone, okay? I think that's where we're gonna stop for today because we don't have enough time. So we will, we'll work on the GI Bill and we'll talk about, the, Brown versus Education.
Are you doing it to see, or are you doing it to make sure you got everything? Both? That's a great
Why can't Miss Dean, not Miss Dean, why can't Miss Pierce monitor?
Oh my God, Jonathan, I have no control over what goes on in this person's class.